Have you ever felt like you're just swimming in information? You're trying really hard to get properly informed on something complex, maybe prepping for a big meeting, or just trying to get your head around a new area?
Oh, absolutely. You end up scrolling through endless articles, papers, maybe even your own notes.
Exactly. And instead of clarity, you just feel like you're drowning in details. What you really want are those, those key nuggets, the aha moments that just cut through all the noise.
It's a universal challenge, I think, especially when you're dealing with really complex regulations like data protection. The sheer amount of legal text, guidelines, interpretations, it's overwhelming. Hard to see what really matters, what actions actually count.
Precisely. And that's exactly why we're here today. We're doing a deep dive into a really fundamental concept in European data protection law, accountability. We're going to focus on Chapter 11 of our source material, which really gets to the heart of it.
Think of us as maybe your guides. We're here to pull out the most crucial bits of knowledge, try to make these complex legal ideas clear, actionable, understandable.
Yeah, our mission for you listening is to really extract those key insights about accountability. We want you to understand not just what it is theoretically, but why it's so important for organizations, for individuals too, and crucially, how companies are actually expected to live up to it in practice.
Right, because accountability, as we'll see, it's really so much more than just ticking a box on a form.
It really is. It's about embedding data protection deep inside into the corporate DNA, as the source puts it. So let's start unpacking this, starting with how it's evolved.
Okay.
So let's kick off this deep dive by looking at how accountability has really changed, especially over the last, say, 2 decades, and particularly with the GDPR coming into force. When we talk accountability now, regulators, legislators, they're just not happy with a simple checklist anymore, are they?
No, that's a critical point, a huge shift.
Hmm.
In the past, maybe having some policies written down, filed away somewhere, or submitting basic registration forms, perhaps that was enough to look compliant on the surface.
Right, sort of the bare minimum.
But the GDPR, it completely changed that game. The expectation now is that organizations have to actively demonstrate it, show that they've not just adopted, but really embedded a genuine culture of data protection. It has to be part of their corporate DNA.
I like that phrase, corporate DNA. It really hits home that this isn't just, window dressing or some regulatory hoop to jump through. It's meant to be internal, ingrained, a real commitment that runs through the whole company.
Hmm.
So the why behind this change is pretty clear then. It's not enough to just say you follow the rules. You've got to be able to prove it. Prove ongoing adherence, ongoing responsibility, usually through documentation, actions, audits.
Precisely.
Mhm.
It's a shift from, let's say, passive compliance to proactive responsibility. And we see this proactive approach being pushed by data protection authorities, the DPAs, across Europe. A really good example is France's DPA, the CNIL.
Ah, the CNI.
Yeah, the Commission nationale de l'informatique et des libertés. They went beyond just general guidance and published something they call the standard.
The CNIL's standard, yeah, that's a powerful example of this proactive accountability idea, isn't it? It's not just broad principles, it's like a detailed roadmap.
Exactly.
It lays out, 25 specific requirements for privacy governance procedures. It really shows what a leading DPA thinks is necessary for a proper data protection program. It makes organizations look at every single angle.
It does. And these requirements aren't abstract, they're very concrete. For instance, they demand you develop both internal and external privacy policies. Think about that.
Okay.
You need a clear message inside the company for employees, but also outside, being transparent with customers, the public.
Yeah.
That dual approach is vital for trust.
Right, building trust proactively.
And the standard also specifies appointing and defining the status of a data protection officer, the DPO, making sure that role has the clout, the resources, the independence it needs to actually work.
And it goes deeper into the operational stuff too, doesn't it? Like pushing companies to do regular data protection audits.
Mm-hmm. Internal checks.
Yeah, checking if the policies are actually being followed, if they're working. And crucially, how to handle data subject access requests, people asking for their data, and how to manage data breaches effectively.
It shows a really holistic view from the big strategy picture right down to the day-to-day stuff.
Hmm.
It's about building that culture of trust from the ground up.
So understanding the shift from just complying to actively demonstrating an embedded culture that really sets the stage for the more specific operational bits we're going to talk about next, right?
Absolutely. Because ultimately, it's in those daily practices, the detailed procedures, that accountability really comes alive. It's where the proof is.
Understood. So if the why is clear, the big question for companies is the how. How do you actually embed this stuff day to day? Which brings us neatly to the human element, employee responsibilities. That's section 11.2.1.3 in the source. This is where the rubber meets the road,
Well,
surely.
absolutely critical, because your policies, however well written, are only as good as the people following them. So internal policies, they have to be really precise. Define exactly what each employee role is allowed to do with personal data: collection, access, processing.
So like a sales associate versus someone in HR, totally different access needs.
Exactly. Vastly different permissions. The policy needs to be granular enough to reflect that, to stop people accessing data they shouldn't just based on their job title.
Okay, so it's about what they can do, but also what they can't do, like limitations on use.
Yes, absolutely. Policies must spell out strict limitations on how data can be used. This ties right back to that core principle of purpose limitation.
Ah, okay.
You collect data for purpose A. You can't just turn around and use it for purpose B, say marketing, without a proper legal basis, maybe more consent. The policy needs to be explicit about what's not allowed to. It sets boundaries.
Makes sense. Boundaries are good.
And beyond use, the policies also need to detail the actual steps employees must take to keep data accurate.
So procedures for data entry, updates, verification.
Exactly. Like, if a customer updates their address, there needs to be a clear process. How does the employee verify it? How do they update it across all systems? It's about data quality.
Okay, now, security obligations. This feels very tangible. Employees need to know their security duties, take reasonable steps to prevent breaches. That sounds simple, but reasonable steps could mean a lot in practice, right? Password rules, spotting phishing.
It covers a huge amount. And these security obligations, while mentioned in the main data protection policy, are often, fleshed out in a separate, more technical information security policy.
Ah, okay, two policies potentially?
Potentially, yes. And the really key thing here, which the source highlights, is the need for proper cross-referencing between them.
Got it. So they link up clearly.
Yes, prevents confusion, makes sure employees see the whole picture. Now, some companies might base these technical policies on standards like ISO 27001 or 27002.
The information security standards.
Right. But it's important to note, the source says there's no specific requirement to do that.
Yeah.
So there's flexibility as long as the security is effective.
Okay, flexibility is good, but the core duty to secure data remains. Now, data transfer is always a tricky area, especially internationally. The starting point is pretty strict. Transferring personal data is prohibited unless you have specific legitimate grounds. It's a default no, basically.
It is. The burden is on the organization to justify every transfer. So the internal policy has to clearly list those legitimate grounds: consent, contract, legal obligation, maybe legitimate interest.
And critically,
Critically, it must specify the steps employees need to take before transferring any data. This is vital.
like what kind of steps?
Well, maybe due diligence on the third party receiving the data, ensuring the right contracts like data processing agreements are in place, perhaps getting internal sign-off before anything is sent. It's not casual.
And I guess this gets even more critical, way more complex, if data is going outside the European Economic Area, the EEA.
Exponentially more complex. That's where things like standard contractual clauses, the SECs, or binding corporate rules, BCRs, come in. These aren't just templates, they're serious legal commitments, often needing a lot of operational work to ensure they're actually effective, especially with how the rules on international transfers keep evolving.
Right, a constantly shifting landscape there.
And finally, accountability covers the end of the line too.
Mm-hmm.
Properly destroying or deleting personal data. Policies need to address this.
Like data retention schedules.
Exactly. Some companies have a separate data retention policy detailing how long different data types are kept
Yeah.
and how they're securely disposed of. But if they do, again, that crucial cross-referencing back to the main data policy is essential.
So employees know the whole life cycle.
Yes, the key is giving enough detail so employees understand their obligations from the moment data comes in, right through to securely getting rid of it. And that includes backups, archives, which is its own challenge.
So pulling all that together, it means employees aren't just following orders, they're active participants. Their understanding and consistent follow-through on these detailed policies are absolutely vital for the company's accountability. It's a shared responsibility.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Okay, so we've talked about the proactive day-to-day stuff employees do. Now let's switch to what happens when things, go wrong. Incident reporting. Section 11.2.1.5. this feels like the first line of defense, a really critical moment.
It absolutely is. Time-sensitive, crucial. The source emphasizes that employees are expressly required to report immediately any incident involving suspected or actual loss, theft, unauthorized disclosure, inappropriate use,
Right.
anything fishy with personal data.
Immediately. The urgency is key.
Urgency is everything, because in a data breach scenario, every minute counts. Even a small delay in reporting can blow the impact way out of proportion, wider exposure, more harm to people, bigger fine.
And it's not just that they report, but who they report to, right?
Yeah.
Clarity there is vital.
Critical. Policies have to clearly name the specific business areas. Is it the IT help desk? Is it a dedicated compliance or legal team? Maybe a security operations center, a SOC.
Right.
Having those clear channels means the right people get alerted fast, enabling a quick coordinated response right from the start. Without that clarity, reports get lost. Time gets wasted.
And this clarity extends even to, say, third-party vendors. If a service provider has a breach affecting your data.
Yes, that's
Yeah.
a really common scenario now. So the policy should also spell out the steps employees take when a third-party service provider notifies them of an incident. It acknowledges that whole data supply chain and ensures vendor incidents get the same urgent attention because the main company, the controller, is often still ultimately accountable.
Which brings us to that really big number, the one that causes sleepless nights for privacy pros, the 72-hour GDPR deadline. Significant personal data breaches must be reported to the relevant DPA within 72 hours of becoming aware. That really drives home why time is all important, doesn't it? You literally don't have days to figure things out before notifying.
Absolutely not. And meeting that kind of deadline, especially if you're a global company operating across time zones, it demands serious preparation. That's why many companies set up comprehensive incident response plans and put dedicated incident response teams in place.
Teams made up of people from different areas.
Ideally, yes. Cross-functional,
Yeah.
IT security, legal, communications, HR, operations, all represented. That structure should be referenced in the policy so everyone knows their role when an incident kicks off. It allows for a rapid, coordinated response.
And the policy should define who does what on that team, like who investigates, who decides on notification.
Exactly. It needs to describe who investigates the incident, gathers the facts, finds the root cause, and, crucially, who has the authority to determine the company's legal obligations, especially around notifying regulators and, potentially, the affected individuals. Clear roles avoid chaos in a crisis.
Makes sense.
And here's something really vital, a crucial practice the source points out. These incident response plans must be stress-tested regularly.
Not just written and filed away.
Definitely not. Regular drills, tabletop exercises, simulations. They find the weak spots, they refine the procedures, they test the communication lines, and they make sure the team can actually function under pressure when a real breach happens. It's like practicing fire drills.
Yeah.
Valuable.
Okay, let's connect this back to the bigger picture of breach notification, maybe drawing a bit from Chapter 10 of the source material. To detect, classify, and notify within that 72-hour window, a company needs more than just a plan on paper, right? It needs a whole internal incident response strategy.
Indeed. It's an operational reality. That strategy includes more than just the written plan. It needs a detailed playbook, step-by-step procedures. It needs that dedicated, trained incident response team we talked about. And often, an operational detection team, like a SOC, constantly monitoring for trouble.
All working together.
All working together for quick detection, accurate classification, and timely notification if needed. And those WP29 guidelines from the Article 29 Working Party, the predecessor to the current European Data Protection Board, the EDPB,
Right, the advisory body?
they give practical help on whether a breach actually needs notification based on assessing the likelihood and severity of risks to individuals. It helps guide that crucial decision under intense pressure.
Now, here's an interesting concept, the encryption safe harbor. Can you explain that?
Sure. It's a key exception, really. If the personal data involved in a breach is rendered unintelligible, basically unreadable, usually through strong encryption, then the controller might be released from the obligation to notify the affected individuals.
Ah, okay. So using strong encryption isn't just good security, it can actually lessen the notification burden, maybe avoid some reputational damage.
Exactly. It's a powerful incentive to encrypt properly, but it's usually just the notification to individuals that might be avoided.
Not necessarily the notification to the authorities.
Generally, the DPA notification might still be required unless the controller can demonstrate the breach is unlikely to result in a risk. There are other exceptions, too, like if the company takes quick steps after the breach to prevent the high risk from actually happening.
So good incident response can help again.
Yes, if you effectively contain it and stop the harm, you might avoid notifying individuals. The other main exception, usually applied very narrowly, is if notification would involve disproportionate effort. Maybe you lost contact details, too, making notification practically impossible. But even then, public announcements might be needed.
So it's clear. From the second an incident is suspected, that clock is ticking. And having a well-rehearsed, comprehensive incident response system, clear policies, good tech, trained teams is absolutely vital for accountability and minimizing harm. It really shows that proactive nature of modern data protection.
Absolutely, it's about preparedness.
Okay, let's shift gears now. From reacting to incidents, let's look at a truly proactive risk management tool. Data Protection Impact Assessments, or DPIAs. Section 11.5.1.2 covers this. This feels like a really powerful accountability mechanism, forcing organizations to look before they leap with new data processing.
It absolutely is. A DPIA is required when processing is likely to result in a high risk to people's rights and freedoms. It's a fundamental shift from being reactive, like cleaning up after a breach, to being proactive and preventative.
Thinking ahead.
Yes, systematically anticipating, identifying, and mitigating risks before you even start the processing. It's about embedding privacy by design into new projects, new technologies right from the beginning.
And if a company has a DPO, we'll talk more about them soon, the source says they should seek the DPO's advice when doing a DPIA, right? Article 35(2) of GDPR.
That's correct. It highlights the DPO's crucial advisory role. They're the internal expert who can guide the assessment, offer insights, help ensure compliance. Getting their input isn't just good practice, it's often expected legally.
So what actually has to be in a DPIA? GDPR Article 35(7) spells it out.
It does, quite meticulously. First, you need a systematic description of the processing. What data, how it's processed, for how long, and why, including any legitimate interests the company is pursuing. Basically, a detailed blueprint.
Okay, the blueprint. What else?
Then a really crucial part, assessing the necessity and proportionality of the processing for the stated purposes.
So asking, do we really need to do this? Is the amount of data we're collecting appropriate, or is it excessive?
Exactly. It forces that data minimization thinking at the design stage. You have to justify why you need the data and how much.
Makes sense. Then what? Risk assessment.
Yes. A thorough assessment of the risks to the rights and freedoms of the individuals involved. What could go wrong? Unauthorized access, discrimination, loss of control, identifying potential harms.
Not only.
Finally, the DPIA must document the measures planned to address those risks, safeguards, security measures, mechanisms to protect the data. It's not just finding problems, it's detailing the solutions you'll put in place to mitigate them. It's that cycle. Identify, assess, mitigate.
What I like about this is how it forces organizations to really think about the impact on people, not just what they want to achieve technically or commercially. It makes privacy by design concrete. And the source connects this to real-world examples from Chapter 14, doesn't it? Situations where DPIAs are pretty much always needed.
Yes, it gives practical pointers. The EDP, the European Data Protection Board, recognizes certain activities as typically high risk, usually needing a DPIA. Workplace monitoring is a prime example.
Because it's inherently intrusive.
Exactly. Even if done for legitimate reasons like security or productivity. Monitoring employees significantly impacts their privacy rights, so it generally needs that prior assessment.
And the other example mentioned.
Whistleblowing schemes also typically require a DPIA.
Even though they serve an important function.
Yes, because while crucial for reporting wrongdoing, the data involved is often highly sensitive. It affects the privacy, maybe reputation, even safety of whistleblowers and those accused. So you need that rigorous assessment of the privacy impacts and strong safeguards built in from the start.
So DPIAs are definitely not just paperwork. They're a vital, mandatory process for vetting high-risk activities before they launch, ensuring privacy is baked in. It really embodies accountability as foresight, not just hindsight.
Precisely. Prevention, not just cure.
Okay, this leads us nicely to another key player in the accountability picture. Someone you could almost call the accountability champion inside a company. The Data Protection Officer, the DPO. Section 11.6.1 delves into this role.
That's a great description. The DPO really is that key internal resource, the strategic advisor for data protection compliance. They're the go-to expert on privacy matters, helping guide, monitor, and oversee compliance with GDPR and other laws.
A multifaceted role.
Very. Legal advice, internal checks, being the contact point for individuals and the authorities.
Now, GDPR has an interesting provision allowing a group of undertakings, like a big multinational, to appoint a single DPO for the whole group. That sounds efficient, right? Centralizing expertise.
On the surface, yes, it can seem streamlined. But, and this is a big but, there's a crucial condition. That group DPO must be easily accessible to every single company within that group.
Easily accessible. What does that mean in practice, more than just having their email address?
Much more. It's not just about physical location or time zones. It's about their genuine ability to effectively engage with, communicate with, and give tailored advice to all parts of the organization, no matter where they are, what they do. It's about real, practical accessibility.
And that easily accessible condition could create some real practical headaches for a group DPO, couldn't it? Like, what if the DPO doesn't speak the local language everywhere the company operates?
That's a very common and significant hurdle. Language barriers can seriously hinder effective communication, understanding the nuances, building the trust that DPO needs.
And what about local laws? GDPR is harmonized, but member states can add specifics.
Exactly. There's the challenge of the DPO not being familiar enough with how data protection rules work in specific local jurisdictions. Member states have derogations, specific national rules, creating this complex patchwork across Europe. A DPO based in, say, Germany might not fully grasp the subtleties of compliance in Spain or Poland.
So if the DPO isn't fluent locally or doesn't know the local legal nuances, how did that impact their ability to actually do the job and meet that easily accessible requirement?
It can seriously hamper their ability to show their expertise, give accurate advice for that context, and just generally fulfill their role effectively. That lack of local knowledge, maybe cultural understanding too, can undermine the whole point of having a DPO.
It makes it hard for them to monitor compliance properly or talk effectively with local teams or local DPAs.
Right. For accountability to work, the DPO needs to be genuinely effective, accessible, and competent in the relevant contexts. A remote, centralized DPO, while maybe efficient on paper, could easily lead to compliance gaps on the ground.
And this links back to a fundamental point from GDPR Article 38. The DPO needs proper support and independence, right?
Absolutely crucial. The company must provide the necessary resources, budget, staff, technical tools, and critically ensure the DPO can act independently without conflicts of interest.
So they can't be pressured to sweep things under the rug.
Precisely. They need direct access to top management, the freedom to report compliance issues, identify risks, recommend fixes, all without fear of repercussions. That independence is what allows them to be a true guardian of data protection, fostering that genuine culture of accountability, not just a tick box exercise.
Their independence is key to their effectiveness.
The cornerstone, really.
So the DPO isn't just a job title, it's a vital, properly supported, genuinely accessible role, a real linchpin for the whole accountability framework, connecting the legal rules with the operational reality.
Well put.
Okay, so as we start to wrap up this deep dive on accountability and data protection, it's really clear we've looked at something complex, dynamic, definitely more than just a simple checklist. It's about embedding a whole culture around data.
Indeed. We've walked through how these core pieces, clear employee roles, robust incident reporting, proactive DPIAs, well-supported and accessible DPOs, how they all fit together. They're the operational pillars for being truly accountable under GDPR.
And it really is an ongoing journey, isn't it? Not a destination you just arrive at. It needs constant effort, vigilance, testing the plans, embedding the principles deep into the company culture. It's about showing that commitment day in, day out.
Exactly. The burden of proof is firmly on the organization, not just saying you're compliant, but actively showing you foster this proactive data protection culture, being able to evidence the steps, the decisions, the controls.
Which brings us to a final thought, maybe something a bit provocative for you, our listener, to think about after we finish. As our physical world and our digital worlds get more and more tangled up, I think about things like extended reality, digital twins, the metaverse. How are organizations going to keep meeting this burden of proof for accountability?
Good question. How will they adapt their practices to make sure those fundamental privacy principles, which sometimes feel grounded in a more tangible reality, how do they stay strong, stay cornerstones in this constantly evolving, immersive digital landscape?
Yeah.
It really builds on that idea from Chapter 6 that core privacy principles are still vital, even with brand new tech changing how we interact with data and each other.
It's definitely a challenge that's going to shape data protection for years, probably decades to come.
No doubt about it.
A challenge we'll certainly be watching closely. Thanks for diving deep with us today.